Well, we're picking up the pieces in the wake of the United States Supreme Court's final, well, what can we call it? They dropped their drawers and took a crap on America with the final set of opinions, including one related to birthright citizenship, but not birthright citizenship, about nationwide injunctions and class actions. What is all that you're talking, Popok? It sounds like Chinese algebra. What's happening there? Well, we break it down for you. Legal AF, the only way we know how, without blowing smoke or sunshine. Here's a clip from Legal AF.
That was officially their last day of the term before Clarence Thomas takes his usual trip funded by the billionaires. Maybe he's going to go on the foam party on Bezos's yacht with Bezos's stepson. Who knows what journey Clarence Thomas will be taking this time around. But in all seriousness, this is the last day, and he's probably going to do something like that. But in all seriousness, it was the last day in the term. It's when this right-wing fascist Supreme Court makes its most horrible rulings. They usually save the worst for last and try to bury it on a Friday. And it's no different this time. Their nationwide injunction case and a case involving LGBTQ opt-outs in a Maryland school district in Montgomery County, where parents were saying for religious reasons they didn't want their kids to be around LGBTQ books there, under their ability to free exercise their religion inside the school. So, Popok, let's start with nationwide injunctions. The case involved birthright citizenship. The headline that came out and the initial reporting was obviously this is an absolute disaster. It's still a bad ruling. There's ways around it, but break down the ruling. And it was, by the way, in terms of the drama in the Supreme Court, like all hell was breaking loose inside the Supreme Court, where you had the justices. I guess it was the equivalent of like a Supreme Court rap battle, if you will. They read opinions that they feel strongly about. So you would have the different justices like read their opinions, and then they would go back and forth with each other, like staring each other down. And Alito would stare down Ketanji Brown Jackson, and she would read these points. And Sotomayor would step in, and Kagan would say, you've just thrown our country into. Anyway, that was basically what's going on. But Popok, tell us what happened in the ruling.
Well, yeah, and we're fighting for the soul of America and democracy. Unfortunately, we're doing it through a Supreme Court that is divided, and divided, I mean, not equally divided. It's 6-3 MAGA right wing on issues that matter most to our audience. You can get Amy Coney Barrett occasionally to like slide over to the other side on a matter that's less important. And Roberts the same, but on things that fundamentally involve our separation of powers, the co-equal branches of government, the presidency, the ability to control the presidency, we're outnumbered. And they are using and pressing their advantage in a way that I've never seen. I've seen it in the last 5 years. And just to put it in context, I've been alive for 59 years. For more than 50 years, the United States Supreme Court has been dominated by Republican appointees. I have never known in my lifetime, and neither have you, a Supreme Court that has been run by the moderates to the liberals at all. So it's not about that, because I was okay. I may not have agreed with every opinion, but I was okay when we had Republicans like Sandra Day O'Connor or Black or others that Kennedy even, that I could find some common ground with. That's over. And so we were concerned, you and me and Legal AF, when they took nationwide injunctions, meaning does a trial court level federal judge have in their tool bag something called the ability, when he or she only has a couple of parties in front of them, or 19 or 20 states in front of them, the ability, depending upon what is the violation on the other side. Is it a nationwide violation that impacts everyone equally the way a constitutional violation or abuse of power does? Because if Trump, as president with the executive branch, is creating nationwide harm by an executive order attacking birthright citizenship, an executive order taking billions of dollars away from the states because of DEI nonsense, taking billions of dollars away from foreign policy and humanitarian aid or Social Security or Medicare, things that have nationwide implications. Why shouldn't a federal judge who is declaring that unconstitutional be able to fashion an appropriate remedy that is symmetrical, that matches the nationwide impact, without having to have 50 or 50,000 lawsuits having to be filed with individual judges or a class action? And class action is not, we're going to talk about what a class action is, but class action is not a proper vehicle for every type of case that involves trying to rein in Donald Trump. Because not every state has the same policies. Not every state has the identical claims, which are necessary for Rule 23 class action under typicality. We'll talk about that in a minute. So using, this callous comment that Kavanaugh made in this new decision we're going to talk about, in which he said, well, just do a class action with an injunction, and that's the equivalent of a universal injunction. It's not, because of the hurdles that are baked into class action as a vehicle, and the elements of it don't fit every type of constitutional violation. The 6-3 Supreme Court said only the United States Supreme Court has the ability to enter a universal declaration about an abuse of power or constitutional abuse by a president, not at the lower level. That's our job. You do your cases. You do your cases in controversy of whoever is in front of you. You fashion a remedy that's no larger than it needs to be to address that case and those facts. And then the underlying constitutional issue, it'll get to us eventually. And we will be the ones to declare that it is unconstitutional. What happens in the middle? The baby's born in the meantime in states that are going to recognize the executive order. That's none of our concern. And they went after, Amy Coney Barrett went after Ketanji Brown Jackson, not just on the dais or on the bench, but in her written order, basically calling her an idiot. I've seen, Scalia used to go after his brethren a lot, but I've never seen Amy Coney Barrett or anybody go after Ketanji Brown Jackson the way they did. And what the 6-3 MAGA majority's view is. And they left open the issue about if the states are involved, whether like 19 states get together, like you and I report on a lot of these things, like led by Letitia James and Rob Bonta and California, New York, all these state cases, there's about 50 to 100 of them, whatever it is, whether this ruling applies to them, whether a judge is precluded from using nationwide injunction if there is a state or states that have bound together. Leave that for another moment. But in general, they have now ripped away the ability of any individual federal judge to not only declare Donald Trump's actions rogue and unconstitutional, but to do anything about it from a nationwide perspective. Now, they're saying, well, do it by class action. All right, so how do you do that? Well, there's a rule, and you got to make sure you comply with the rule. And you have people like Alito and his concurrence going, and make sure there's no abuse of class actions. We don't want to see that either. So which is it? So now every time the attorneys general or the public interest groups, or we'll talk about that in a minute, run back into court, they already have, and said, all right, we want a class action certification. We have our class plaintiffs. We want to certify a class as everybody similarly situated who's being abused by Donald Trump's constitutional action, and then issue an injunction off of that. Then the Trump administration, right on cue, is going to attack the class action vehicle being an inappropriate vehicle. And just a quick teach out moment. There's two ways to bring a case into court. Either an individual case, which is one to, could be a couple of hundred plaintiffs, but not large enough to satisfy collective or class action status. So you have an individual case involving those parties only, and the relief the court can grant to those parties only and no more. And then you've got a class action, which is a few plaintiffs, and plaintiffs' lawyers come into court and say, this is an injury that's happening around the country or among a group of people that are all similarly situated with typical type claims and with a very numerous amount, and it's better to be a class action vehicle. But then you have to have the fight over whether that's appropriate or not. Now, so both Sotomayor and Kavanaugh gave the roadmap for what happened several hours later after the ruling on Friday, which was you're now, if you are representing people whose children are born or about to be born, and the 14th Amendment citizenship is ripped away from them by the executive order, you need to go back into court quickly with a class action and a temporary restraining order, and then get this case as quickly back to the United States Supreme Court as possible. Within 3 hours, the same case, the same group, CASA Inc., that brought the Supreme Court case, ran into court in Maryland in front of Judge Bowman and filed a motion for class action certification and an emergency motion for temporary restraining order, which is up for grabs, and we'll have to report on it off of the show as the next few days move forward. Here's what the Trump administration had to say about the ruling. And there are 24 different national injunctions, which are now all imperiled. They're done. They're going to have to all be revisited by judges who are going to have to figure out how to narrow this down to the parties and or consider class action certification. That includes birthright citizenship, which we just talked about, which is the subject of 3 different nationwide injunctions, but also includes immigration issues, deportation issues, funding issues, state funding issues, education funding issues, and the list goes on. Here's what Donald Trump's view of the case. Now, birthright citizenship itself was not decided. They made a point of saying, we're just here on nationwide injunctions. But we're telling you how to get back to us on birthright citizenship and how quickly to do it and what the procedure or the order of operation is. Now, the minority here, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Sotomayor, and Kagan, mainly Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson, said, we are watching a court complicit with allowing and promoting an imperial president that cannot be checked by the judiciary. Amy Coney Barrett said, no, you're wrong. It's not that we're not going to check it. It's that we're not going to allow a potential abuse of power by the president to be matched by a potential abuse of power by the judiciary. That's not, the 2 wrongs don't make a right either. And just get the case up procedurally the right way, and we'll take care of it from here. Thank you very much. Birthright citizenship, even the Trump administration doesn't believe, was ruled upon on Friday. Here's what Bondi said. Pam Bondi said, yes, birthright citizenship will be decided in October. Now she's controlling the court's docket. In the next session by the Supreme Court, even though the High Court has not accepted the case and it's not procedurally right. So for right now, from now till October, and the babies are in purgatory. Because the red states, the parents are like, hey, here's my birth certificate. My child was born here. I'm applying for aid. You're not a citizen. I need a passport for my child. She's citizenless. What do you mean she's citizenless? I need to go travel to somewhere. Who's going to issue me the passport? Well, the executive order says, and we don't have a ruling definitively, and we're not subject to any of the injunctions. That is what's going to happen between now and the time the Supreme Court gets around to ruling. It may be earlier than in October. It may be an emergency application more quickly than that over the summer, with this band getting back together again and setting oral argument. But here's one of the most 2 depraved things, Ben, I'll turn it back, that Donald Trump did. This shows you the mental depravity and the mental decline of Donald Trump. When reached for comment about the decision on nationwide injunction, he made a comment about birthright citizenship. He said that the 14th Amendment, that was meant for the babies of slaves. It wasn't meant for people trying to scam the system and come into the country on a vacation. This is how the executive branch thinks, that the amendments post-Reconstruction in this country are only to be applied to people who were slaves or the descendants of slaves, which I don't even think this United States Supreme Court is going to go along with that. And then lastly, on the day that they announce that their hand is strengthened to try to rip away birthright citizenship from the 14th Amendment, Donald Trump announces the gold visa the $5 million buy a U.S. citizenship program. So if you're born here, he's not recognizing your citizenship. But if you want to pay $5 million, he'll put you on a fast track to citizenship. Disgusting.
So let me just present this case to our audience as I would to a jury, as it relates to Ketanji Brown Jackson and the liberal justices' fear of an imperial president violating the law and then using the inability now of district courts to potentially issue nationwide injunctions to kind of very rapidly push forward the violation of law until you have, hundreds of lawsuits filed in every corner and in every district based on the potential confusion caused? Or do you think the big concern here is an imperial judiciary? You go back to the ruling on absolute immunity with the same 6-3 right-wing Supreme Court dynamic, giving Donald Trump absolute immunity. And we saw in the oral arguments and in the questioning by the judges, the liberal justices, although I don't like that term, the pro-democracy judges, the ones who were appointed by the Democrats, they said you can't give the president absolute immunity. We're not worried about a president feeling that their executive actions are going to be chilled because they should just follow the law. This has never been an issue by any other United States president who's claimed they want to commit crimes. No one is above the law, including the president, and there should be checks on that. If a president commits a crime, they should be held criminally accountable, to which the 6 right-wing justices says, no. Unitary executive, special, we can't chill. We can't have someone like a Trump get worried that everything they do could potentially be criminal. We got to make sure that their deliberations are not impeded by even the thought of being brought up on crimes, if it could anyway be construed in their official capacity. It's that same kind of logic, here in a way, of the liberal justices saying federal courts have a role in this to check executive power if the executive is not following the law. I'm not saying that, district courts are just going to start making crap up. If there's a violation of the law, for example, if birthright citizenship is in the Constitution and Trump says by executive order, not even legislation, by executive order, I'm declaring people who are born here not citizens, and I'm going to deport you by executive order, a district court should say no. And especially in a case like birthright citizenship, a nationwide injunction makes a ton of sense because what? If you're now born in Kentucky, you're not a citizen. If you're born in New York or Massachusetts or New Hampshire, you are a citizen based on where the district court sits. And then even more than that, you have to be within. If you're in the Central District of California, you may be this. But if you're in the Eastern District of California, Bakersfield, Fresno, you may not be a citizen. That doesn't make any sense. So now everybody has to file lawsuits everywhere. That's what Ketanji Brown Jackson's saying. And this is what Amy Coney Barrett said in her opinion. We will not dwell on Justice Jackson's argument, which is at odds with more than 2 centuries worth of precedent, not to mention the Constitution itself. We observe only this. Justice Jackson decries an imperial executive while embracing an imperial judiciary. And do you see that Amy Coney Barrett there is not only just dissing Jackson, she's dissing the court. And if you want to take her word for it right there, the way the Constitution's been for 2 centuries, then why Amy Coney Barrett has nationwide injunctions like this always existed and always been allowed until you've just declared otherwise, the same way you've overturned all these other precedents. She goes on to say the following in Amy Coney Barrett's decision. No one disputes that the executive has a duty to follow the law, but the judiciary does not have unbridled authority to enforce this obligation. In fact, sometimes the law prohibits the judiciary from doing so. Let's pause there. So, yes, there are workarounds to this ruling, right? Class actions can be filed. to seek nationwide injunctions on that basis. States likely can seek nationwide injunctions. But what I say is most disturbing is what I just read for you, saying that no one disputes that the president has a duty to follow the law, but the judiciary does not have unbridled authority to enforce this obligation. Like, do you realize what she just said right there? That the judges do not have unbridled authority. If the judges see the president violating the law, that judges have to be like, well, nothing we can do here. If the police officer is watching the murder, nothing I can do here. Just, I guess, go do it. See you later. On your way, because you have special significance. To me, that strikes at the exact opposite of what our country's built on. And if you want to know whose fears are right, the Imperial Judiciary fears of Amy Coney Barrett or the Imperial Executive fears of Ketanji Brown Jackson, just watch what Donald Trump did right after this ruling, where in fact Donald Trump said, as a result of this ruling, we're coming for everybody. We think that we should be able to, by executive order, we're going to send our military and our troops like we've done in California and ICE, and we're coming for you all. Listen to him. This is what Trump said. Let's play it.
So thanks to this decision, we can now properly file to proceed with these numerous policies and those that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis, including birthright citizenship, ending sanctuary city funding, suspending refugee resettlement, freezing unnecessary funding, stopping federal taxpayers from paying for transgender surgeries, and numerous other priorities of the American people. We have so many of them. I have a whole list. I'm not going to bore you, and I'm going to have Pam get up and say a few words, but there's really, she can talk as long as she wants.
So whose concerns there are more justified? And the reality is, my view is, if you break the law, I do think the judiciary, if you see the legal violation, you're a federal judge, you're an Article 3 judge, call me old-fashioned, but I do think that you have the authority to say, no, I'm not going to allow that, subject to the safeguards of our system, which is the district judge doesn't act as king. The district judge makes a ruling. Then there's a court of appeals. Then it goes to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court already, Popok, has been staying or pausing district court rulings that involve nationwide injunctions to begin with.
Welcome back. We sit at the intersection of law and politics, so you don't have to. We do that show twice a week as a podcast, full length, 1 hour long, Wednesdays and Saturdays on the Midas Touch Network. And then we put versions of that over on Legal AF, so it will be one-stop shopping on Legal AF, the YouTube channel. And then audio podcast, wherever you can download it from. Great news, because you've joined our movement as part of your journey. We're now in the top 50 of all podcasts, regardless of the type, on YouTube's weekly rankings. That's because of you, but we got to continue to grow that audience. We're not done. We're trying to get to 1 million subscribers this summer on the Legal AF YouTube channel and more downloads on the audio version of Legal AF, the podcast. That's where you come in. Take that clip, send it off to people in your life, and ask them to join our movement as part of their journey. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states. States and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.